Hi, everyone, and welcome to the wrap up for week 3. So, this information is just for reinforcement. Everything that I'm discussing is found in your Little Seal handbooks, just providing a little bit more examples and trying to make the definitions a little bit clearer. So, let's just get started. So, the outcomes, students will be able to identify and describe different writing genres and their conventions and apply these conventions to their own writing. So, the goal is that after we go through all of the information, you should be able to utilize these techniques in your own writing. Students will demonstrate correct subject verb agreement in their writing, maintaining consistency and clarity. Students will use periods, exclamation marks, and question marks accurately to end sentences and convey appropriate emphasis or inquiry. Students will apply quotation marks correctly for dialogue and citations and use apostrophes properly for contractions and possession. So let's just go over some of the main points for the reading. You were assigned the reading of the Black Identity essay. So you're supposed to read the first half this week and conclude with the second half next week. So I just pulled out some of the major points for this first week, which was the first half of the reading. So the author states that advocates for slavery argued that slavery is a just practice because blacks are inferior to whites. So that was the foundation for the advocacy of slavery. This argument of white superiority negated the inhumanity of slavery. So they said that blacks are not human because they are less superior. So whatever abuse um, we inflict and whatever inhumane conditions we inflict, it's okay because these people are inferior to us. Advocates of slavery also use the Bible to justify the practice of slavery. And the author also talks about how Robert Walsh's appeal becomes the prototypical document that was used to justify slavery. So other authors at the time used the same format as a way to validate their argument that slavery was a good thing for Anglo, as the author calls them, Anglo Americans. Um, Absolute equality is impractical, and there has to be a hierarchy with Anglo Americans at the top and blacks at the bottom. They also talk about whether racism evolved from slavery or was slavery the result of racism. And the author um, shows both sides of this argument and presents um, the counterpoints to this argument, why some people believe that racism is a direct result of slavery versus those who believe that that racism was actually the catalyst for slavery. So, the principles of the American Revolution directly conflicted with the premise of slavery and laid the groundwork for oppositional arguments. So, the premise of the American Revolution is that all people are created equal. However, in the justification, it says that all people are created equal except for blacks, right? Because they are um, not human and therefore they are inferior, right? But then as you talk about, the principles of the American Revolution, they're saying that no, in the American Revolution documentation, you say that all men are created equal. So then this sparks this counter argument to the claims. And then the white race is actually a rhetorical invention. And what that means is that there is no such thing as the white race, right? Because all of the white people who came to the Americas came from European descent, right? So you're talking about Irish, Italian, um, they came to America, there is no actual white race, right? So that's the argument. So I would be interested in, as you look at the second half of the documentation and the second part of the justifications, looking at or countering those arguments as the author progresses and countering those validations. But those are just some key points that you should have gotten from your reading. So now let's talk about our Little Seagull um, units, right? So the first unit that you had to look at was rhetorical context. And when we talk about rhetorical context, we're talking about first your purpose, right? Which is, why are you writing? And you can write for a variety of reasons. You can write for cathartic purposes. So if you have a journal, you're writing for cathartic reasons. You're not looking for anyone to read it. You're just trying to get some things off of your chest, right? Um, you can write to convince someone of something, an argumentative essay. You can write to entertain or to relay specific facts. Each of these different purposes will dictate how you write. For example, if you're writing a journal entry for your own personal reading, it's going to be very casual. You're not necessarily going to apply rules of grammar. You're just going to write free thought, freehand. Um, you may not use any punctuation or apply any grammatical rules, right? If you're writing to convince someone of something, you'll include evidence to support your argument so that you can convince them. Um, and then your audience, right? Your audience is basically, who are you writing for? So when you're considering your audience, the considerations are very similar, right? As we discussed last week, writing for children will be different than when you're writing for an adult. Also, if you're writing a message to your friends, it's going to look very different than if you're writing a communication to me as your teacher. When you communicate to friends or peers, it can be very informal, but when you're writing to a teacher, you should use formal language. You shouldn't be like, yo, professor, right? It should be dear professor, hi professor, something more formal. And then the textbook goes even deeper when talking about your audience. It's saying, for example, you should look at what the educational backgrounds of your reader is. What is their demographic? Meaning, are they wealthy? Are they poor? Are they uneducated? And that should determine how you make your content more appealing to that specific demographic. When we talk about genre, right, we're talking about, what kind of writing is it? So is it an essay? Is it a memo? Is it instructional? If you're writing an essay, it requires evidence and source recognition because you don't want to plagiarize. If you're writing a memo is succinct and to the point. Instructional writing, it has to be very clear, very detailed. Um, and then your topic. What are you writing about, right? That's probably one of the most important components. What are you writing about? And then when you look at your stance and your tone, if you're angry or if you're excited, that is your stance. You may include a lot of, exclamation points, right, to indicate that you're excited or that you're angry. And then when you talk about your tone, um, are you selecting appropriate words and punctuation so that people can understand what your stance is? You may also include adverbs to convey excitement or dissatisfaction. So if you say, um, you know, that message was ineffectively communicated, right? People know that you're not taking a positive stance because you're saying it's ineffective, right? So you're taking a negative stance. You're probably angry, or the food was inadequately served. My previous comment was unsuccessful in convincing him that he was wrong. Language like that knows that you're taking an adverse stance, so to speak. So, when we're talking about academic writing, these are the key components of academic writing because that's probably what we're going to look at the most during this course, right? So, academic writing, the evidence that you have clearly considered the subject, right? And that comes out with your documentation and your citations. You need to have a clear thesis statement, which we will go over the thesis statement next week. Response to what others have said. So you have to make sure that you're including counter arguments in your writing and being responsive. So, why you disagree with the documentation, or even why you agree as well with the documentation, but showing that other people have talked about this subject and what are those discussions that have been happening. Good reasons supported by your evidence, recognition of these other perspectives, documentation of the sources, that you take a confident and authoritative stance. So you shouldn't whiffle waffle, right? If you're arguing for something, you should be confident about it and your stance on it should be clear. And then, why does the topic matter? Why are we even here to discuss this? Why is this a part of conversation? And then you should also pay attention to the style norms, meaning if you're using MLA or APA formatting, you should pay attention to what that looks like. So, academic writing, of course, requires good, strong research because that's the foundation for the writing so that you can include all of the content that you need, right? Those oppositional voices, um, documenting your sources, all of that comes about through research. So, the reading that we looked at this week, it exhibits all of the above, right? As he presents his arguments, you see the counterpoints, you see the citation of different sources that he utilized to create his argument. Um, and when the writer presents the argument, they also illustrate the additional perspectives that prevailed as the opposition or contributed to the validation or the justification for slavery, right? He does a very, very good job of showing us all of the juxtaposed points, right? So those who were for slavery that this um, believed that inhumanity of blacks, right? But then the opposition came about, and those were the people who relied on the arguments from the American Revolution and why those voices, although they ran concurrently, weren't in agreement, right? So those are the documentations or the justifications that he provides to validate his argument. So as you continue reading, take all of this into consideration and also keep in mind looking at his formatting. Okay. So, some reading strategies. Um, when you're reading these essays, you want to find the thesis statement in those introductory paragraphs, right? And as you're reading longer articles, the introductions are going to tend to run longer. So it's not going to be in that, it's not necessarily going to be in that first paragraph, right? It may take you a few paragraphs deep before you can find the thesis statement. But the thesis statement will tell you what the essay is about. And that's going to guide you as you're reading. What is this person's general argument? You should be persistent. And that means that you may have to read the sentences or the paragraphs multiple times just to understand what the writer is trying to convey. Determine the purpose of the text. Is the author trying to convince you of something, or are they just being factual and relaying information? And then as you look at different uh, types of writing over your coursework, you will start to see the difference, right? So if you're looking at something that's scientific, it's going to be more so um, direct and just informational and factual. And what is the claim that the author is trying to make? And do they provide adequate evidence to support their claim? All right, so let's get into the grammar. So the first section that you were to look at was comma splices and fuse sentences. So a comma splice is two independent clauses that are joined together with a comma. So last week we did talk about independent and dependent um, clauses, right? So an independent clause is a complete thought that stands alone. It has a subject and a verb. A dependent clause is missing any of those components, meaning it's not a complete thought. It cannot stand alone. It is missing the subject or its verb, right? So we consider comma splices a grammatical error because it puts together two independent clauses without the appropriate conjunction or appropriate punctuation. So, for example, she enjoys reading. She often visits the library. In this example, she enjoys reading and she often visits the library. They are both independent clauses, but they are separated by a comma. And the comma alone is not sufficient to connect them properly. So, what do you do to correct a comma splice, right? You can separate them, making them two separate sentences. So that would be she enjoys reading, period. She often visits the library. Or what period, or you can use a semicolon to connect them. So that would be she enjoys reading, semicolon, she often visits the library, period, because they are very closely related, so that can be appropriate. um, you can use a comma with a coordinating conjunction. So you would add the coordinating conjunction for, and well, some examples of coordinating conjunctions are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, or so after your comma. So to correct this, she enjoys reading and, I'm sorry, I should illustrate this a little bit better. She enjoys reading, comma, and she often visits the library, period. So, and is your conjunction. Or you can use a subordinating conjunction and turn one of the clauses into a subordinate dependent clause by adding a subordinating conjunction. So, examples of our subordinating conjunctions: because, since, although. So to correct it, she enjoys reading because she often visits the library. So you've extracted your comma, you've added because, and that makes it a complete thought. So let's look at some more comma splices and the corrections. The weather was nice, comma, we went for a walk. So that can be corrected to the weather was nice, period. We went for a walk, period. Or the weather was nice, semicolon. We went for a walk, period. Right? Because those things are closely related. Also, the weather was nice, comma, so your coordinating conjunction, we went for a walk. Here's another one with the comma splice. He forgot to call me, comma, I was worried, right? So to correct, we could do the period. He forgot to call me, period. I was worried, period. Or we can do the semicolon. He forgot to call me, semicolon. I was worried, period. Or we can do the conjunction. He forgot to call me, comma, and I was worried, period. So you should have looked in the textbook, because the textbook is going to give you some different examples and break down some more of the coordinating conjunctions, etc. Okay. So let's talk about verbs. A verb is a part of speech that expresses an action, occurrence, or state of being. And what does that mean? We'll talk about that a little bit more deeply. But verbs are essential to sentences because they provide the main information about what is happening. They tell you what the subject of the sentence is doing, which can be an action, experiencing, which can be an occurrence, or being, what is their current state. So you have a variety of different types of verbs, and we're going to go into that. Action verbs. These verbs describe physical or mental actions. So, a physical action: run, write, jump. An example: she runs every morning. A mental action: think, believe, remember. An example: he thinks about the future. Thinks is your verb. Then we have linking verbs. These verbs connect the subject of a sentence with the subject complement, which the subject complement describes or identifies the subject. The most common linking verb is to be in its various forms. So, forms of to be: is, am, are, was, were. But others could be seem, become, and appear. So let's go into an example. She is a teacher. Is links the subject she to the subject complement, a teacher, right? Then we have helping verbs. Helping verbs are used with a main verb to form different tenses, voices, or moods. And we will go more in depth into that. Common helping verbs include have, be, and do. So, an example: they are studying. The verb are helps form the present continuous tense with the main verb studying. Another example: she has finished her work. Has helps form the present perfect tense with the main verb finish. She has finished. Then you have modal verbs. These are verbs that express necessity, possibility, permission, or ability. So, common modal verbs include can, could, may, might, must, shall, should, will, and would. And so, an example: you should see a doctor. Should suggests advice or necessity, right? Um, so, so when we're talking about verbs, they have forms, right? And the base form is the simplest form of the verb used with to. So, to eat, to play. And then you have the past tense of the verb. It indicates that the action has already happened. So the past tense of eat is ate. The past tense of play is played. And then you have your past participle. So the past participle is used with helping verbs to form perfect tenses in what we call the passive voice. So, an example, eaten, right, is the past tense of eat. She has eaten. Or played. She has played. So the present participle or the gerund, which usually ends in ing, can be used to form continuing tenses, or it can be used as a noun. So example, eating, playing, and then examples in the sentences. So an example of an action verb, she writes a letter. An example, right? So writes is the action. Examples of a linking verb, the sky is blue. Is blue. Examples of a helping verb, he has been working hard, right? Working hard. Example of modal verb, they might go to the concert. Might, because it's not actual, right? Whew, okay, that's a lot. Let's talk about active and passive voice. So active and passive voice are two different ways of constructing sentences, and each has a distinct way they impact the focus and the clarity of the sentence. So as we talk about it, you'll understand why the active voice is preferred over the passive voice. So, in the active voice, the subject of the sentence performs the action of the verb, right? This structure is more clear, direct, and more engaging. So, in active voice, the structure is subject, verb, object. So, our examples, the cat, which is the subject, chased, which is the verb, the mouse, the object, right? The cat is chasing the mouse. That is your object. Your mouse is your object. So, with an adverb, the teacher is the subject, quickly explained, explained is your verb, the lesson, lesson is the object. In a more complex sentence, the scientist, your subject, discovered is your verb, a new method, the new method is the object, while conducting experiments, additional content. In your passive voice, the object of the action becomes the subject of the sentence, and the performer of the action or the agent can be omitted or included with a prepositional phrase. Um, this structure is often used when the focus is on the action itself or the recipient of the action rather than the person who is performing it. So for the passive structure, you have the subject, a form of to be, and your past participle by an agent. So let's look at this, right? The mouse is the subject, was chased, your verb, by the cat. The cat is the agent. Then, without an agent, a new method is your subject, was discovered, your verb, during the experiments, your additional content. In the complex sentence, the lesson is your subject, was quickly explained, your verb, by the teacher. The teacher is the agent. So, as we said, the active voice focuses on the doer of the action, right? The example, the chef, the subject, cooked, the verb, a delicious meal, the object. The passive voice focuses on the receiver of the action or the action itself. A delicious meal, the subject, right? was cooked, the verb, by the chef. The delicious meal is the receiver of the cooking, right? By whom? The chef. So active voice is generally clearer and more engaging for readers. So another example, the company is the subject, launched is the verb, a new product, the object. And passive voice can be sometimes less clear, but more formal or indirect. So, a new product, which is the subject, was launched, which is the verb, by the company, the agent, right? The company is the agent. So, as we said, active voice is preferred in most of the writing because it's clearer and more direct. Passive voice is more often used in formal scientific writing or when the doer of the action is unknown or less important. So let's look at converting active to passive, or passive to active, right? So the writer subject completed, which is the verb, the novel, which is the object. And then the passive voice would be the novel, which is the subject, was completed, which is the verb, by the writer, who is the agent. So we prefer active voice over passive voice. So as you're writing, make sure that you're thinking in the active voice. And if you see a sentence that's in the passive, it can easily be converted to active just by changing the word order. Let's talk about moods. Not your personal mood or my personal mood, but verb moods. So, moods indicate the speaker's attitude toward the action or state described by the verb. They reflect how the speaker feels about the action, whether it's a fact, a command, a possibility, or a wish. So there are three primary verb moods: indicative, imperative, and subjunctive. So the indicative mood is used to make factual statements, ask questions, or express opinions. It's the most common mood and deals with statements of fact or based in reality. Oop. Examples: she writes reports every day. Question: do you like the new policy? Opinion: I think the meeting was productive. So, characteristics of indicative mood: it's used for straightforward declarations and questions. Conjugation of the verbs in this mood follow standard and specific patterns. Follow standard patterns, meaning regular conjugation. So, imperative mood. The imperative mood is used to give commands, make requests, or offer invitations. It directly addresses someone and often omits the subject, which is usually the implied you. So, examples: close the door. That's a command. Please pass the salt. That's a request. It's an invitation. Join us for dinner. And last week we talked about where the offer was made for more coffee, right? Coffee, right? That would have been a request. And the you is implied. So just bringing it back to that previous example, that would have been the imperative mood. So for imperative, you use the verb in its base form, go, eat, right? So without conjugating it. The subject is generally implied and not explicitly stated. It can be softened with a please or other expressions of politeness. Please shut the door. Subjunctive mood. The subjunctive mood is used to express wishes, hypothetical situations, demands, or suggestions. It often deals with conditions that are not reality or are contrary to fact. So, some examples of a wish: I wish that she were here. An example of hypothetical: if I were rich, I would travel the world. A demand or suggestion: it is essential that he be on time. So, the subjunctive often uses verb forms different from the indicative mood. For present or future unreal conditions, it uses were instead of was. For all subject: if I were you, I would. For demands or suggestions, it uses the base forms of the verb, right? So it doesn't conjugate them. It is crucial that she arrive early. Subject verb agreement. Um, I believe a lot of people have difficulty with subject verb agreement. So let's break this down. If the verb in the sentence, if there's a, well, the verb in the sentence must agree with the number of its subject, meaning if you have a singular subject, you're going to have a singular verb. So, for example, she runs every morning. The singular subject, she, takes the singular verb, runs. She runs every morning. If you have a plural subject, you're going to have a plural verb. They run every morning. The plural subject, they, takes the plural verb, run. Okay. So, even though that is our rule, there are special cases and exceptions. So, subjects joined by and. When a subject is joined by and, they take a plural verb. The dog and the cat are sleeping. Subjects joined by or nor. The rule is when the subjects are joined by or nor, the verb should agree with the nearest subject. Either the manager or the employees, right? Employees are plural, are responsible. So you're taking are as your plural verb. Another example: neither the students nor the teacher was late, right? So teacher is singular, so your singular verb was. For collective nouns, when you have collective nouns such as team, group, committee, they may take either the singular or the plural verb depending on whether the group is acting as a unit or as individuals. So the team is winning the game, right? The team is acting as a single unit. So you have a singular verb, is winning. The team are arguing among themselves, right? They're acting as individuals, not very team like, and arguing. So are arguing among themselves. For indefinite pronouns, when you have indefinite pronouns, they are always singular. So, some examples of indefinite pronouns: everyone, someone, while others are always plural. So, several, many, right? Because several is a large group, many is a large group. That's a bunch of people. Example: Everyone is invited to the party, right? Everyone, you have the singular verb is invited. Example, many are coming to the party. That many, you have the plural, are coming to the party. With fractions and percentages, the rule is that the verb agrees with the noun following the fraction or the percentage. 20% of the cake is gone, right? So the noun following is cake. So cake is singular, is gone. You have your singular verb. Half of the students are here. Students is plural. So you have your plural verb are here. For the words none, all, some, the rule is that these can be singular or plural depending on what they refer to. None of the cake is left. So you're referring to the cake and it's singular. None of the students are absent. Students is plural, referring to the countable students, the countable noun. So let's look at some examples of correct versus incorrect, or incorrect versus correct. The list of items are on the table. So you have a list as a singular functioning unit, right? The correct should be the list of items is on the table. My friend, as well as her siblings, are coming, right? So my friend is singular. So your verb is singular. And for this one, you guys can't see this, but I'm going to tell you. So my friend, comma, as well as her siblings, comma, are coming. If you take out as well as her siblings and just read the sentence, my friend is coming versus my friend are coming, that will help you to determine what the correct verb should be. So when you look at something that is separated out by the commas, always extract what's in the commas. And that's going to help you determine what verb you should choose. So another example, neither the book nor the pen were on the desk, and that is incorrect, right? Because neither the book nor the pen was on the desk. So you're going to look at the closest noun to determine whether or not it's singular, right? And you're looking at each separately, the closest noun. So the closest noun is pen. The pen was on the desk. All right. Indefinite pronouns that are always singular. So indefinite pronouns take singular verbs. Oops. Sorry. So, example. Everyone is invited to the party. Right? Everyone is. Everyone, singular verb, is invited. Someone has left their umbrella. Someone has left their umbrella, right? Anybody can join the meeting. Join the meeting, singular. Nobody knows the answer. Knows the answer, singular. Each student has a textbook, singular. Indefinite pronouns that are always plural. So there are some that are always plural and they always take the plural verb. So several of the answers were incorrect. Few are aware of the changes. Many have signed up for the course. Both are interested in the job. All of those verbs are plural. Indefinite pronouns that can be singular or plural. So some indefinite pronouns can be either singular or plural depending on the context and what they are referring to. So the verb must agree with the noun or pronoun following the indefinite pronoun. So for example, all. All of the cake is gone. It's referring to an uncountable noun, cake, right? So that is a singular verb. All of the students are here. It's referring to countable nouns, the students. So are here, you have your plural verb. So the singular, none. None of the water was spilled, referring to an uncountable noun, water, right? You can't count water. You can count water in bottles, but you can't count actual water. None None of the books are on the shelf, referring to a countable noun, right? The books, you can count those, so it's plural. Some of the news is upsetting, referring to something that you cannot count news, so it's singular is, right? Some of the news is upsetting. Plural, some of the cookies, you can count the cookies, are missing. Cookies is plural, so you have are missing, plural noun, plural verb. Most of the milk was used, referring to something uncountable, the milk, right? You can't count milk again unless it's in cartons, the milk cartons. So you're going to have your singular verb, right? Most of the questions were answered, right? Questions is plural. We can count the questions. You're going to have your plural verb. Okay. Quotation marks. So when do you use quotation marks? Quotation marks are used to enclose direct speech, quotations, titles of certain works, and to indicate that the term or phrase being used is being used in a special way. So, quotation marks are used to enclose exact words spoken by someone. So, if you were quoting me, and you would put quotation marks when I say direct speech, right? So some examples. She said, I will call you tomorrow. She specifically says, I will call you tomorrow. So you put that in quotation marks. For dialogue, right? Can you help me with this? You would put, can you help me with this in quotation marks? And I'm using my air quotes because I'm a creature of habit. He asked, of course, quote unquote, she replied. Use quotation marks to enclose a passage or a statement taken from another source. So when you're quoting something directly in the short quote, the report stated the results were inconclusive. The results were inconclusive, you're going to put in quotations. In a long quote, for longer quotations, such as in academic writing, you're going to use block formatting, meaning it's going to be centered in its own paragraph. And then you're going to use quotation marks at the beginning and quotation marks at the end. For titles of short works, use quotation marks for titles of short works such as articles, essays, short stories, poems, songs, and chapters of books. So, for example, in the article, quotation, open quotes, the impact of social media on communication, close quotes, or the poem, The Road, open quotes, not taken, close quotes. Song, Imagine. You're going to use them for words used in a special way. So use quotation marks to indicate that a word or phrase is being used in a special, ironic, or non standard way. So, for example, to express irony, the quote unquote expert, right? Because made a fundamental error in the analysis. Um, so, special usage. The term quote unquote sustainable development is often misunderstood. We talked about this dialogue in fiction or narrative writing. You're going to use quotations to notate a conversation between characters. And citing a word or phrase. So, when referring to a specific word or phrase as the subject of a discussion, you're going to use your quotation marks. So, for example, the word quote unquote innovation means new methods or ideas. Or to focus on something. The term greenwashing, quote unquote, has become more prevalent in recent years. So here's an important part: nested quotations. When quoting someone who is already quoted, use a single quotation mark inside of your double quotation mark. So he said, when she told me, single quote, I'll be late, close single quote, I knew something was wrong. So just anecdotally, in when using periods or commas, um, with quotation marks, periods and commas are placed inside the quotation marks. So I will attend, comma, close quotes, she said. Semicolons and colons are placed outside the quotation marks. So in the article, quote unquote, a new era in technology, close quotes, then your semicolon, provides useful insights. Question marks and exclamation points should be placed inside of your quotation marks if they are part of the quoted material. Otherwise, they will be outside. So, for example, he asked, open quotes, will you be joining us? Question mark, close quotes. Second example, did she really say, open quotes, I'm not coming? Close quotes, outside of the question mark outside of your quotation. Okay. Um, when using quotation marks in combination with parenthetical documentation, it's important to follow the correct format to ensure clarity of the citation. So let's talk about MLA style, APA style, and Chicago style. So MLA style, quotation marks and parenthetical citation work together to indicate the source of the quote or to paraphrase within the text. So you place your quotation marks around the quoted material, and then you place the parenthetical citation directly after closing the quotation mark, and you include the page number. So the example, open quotes, the data clearly shows an increase in sales, close quotes, parent, open parentheses, Smith 22, period. Long quote or block text format. Um, so for block text quotations, MLA does not include quotation marks, right? Because it's centered. Instead, the citation goes after the final punctuation, right? So Smith argues blah, 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 which can be attributed blah, 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 right? Period. And then your page number in parentheses. In APA style, the placement of the quotation marks and the parental citation follows a specific format. So you place the quotation marks around the quoted material, then you place the parenthetical citation immediately after the closing quotation mark before your final punctuation. So short quote. Open quotes. The results were significant. Close quotes. Johnson, comma, year, comma, page. Close parentheses. Okay. And next, we're going to talk about apostrophes. Also a big one. Apostrophes are used in English to indicate possession, form contractions, and sometimes to denote the plural letters or plural of letters or symbols. So, when we're talking about possessions, you use the singular nouns rule. Add an apostrophe and an S to the end of the singular noun to show possession. For example, the dog's leash, so DOG apostrophe S, leash, the leash belonging to the dog. Maria's book, MARIA apostrophe S, the book belonging to Maria. Plural nouns ending with an S, you add the apostrophe after the S. So, the teacher's lounge. Teachers, TEACHERS with the apostrophe after. Cars, the car's engine, right? We're talking about multiple cars. CARAS with the apostrophe at the end after the S. Plural nouns that do not end in S, you're going to add an apostrophe and an S to show the possession. So, the children's toys. Children's, CHILDREN apostrophe S. That apostrophe S shows that the toys belong to the children. For compound nouns, you're going to add the apostrophe and the S to the end. So, my brother-in-laws, BROTHER hyphen IN hyphen LAW apostrophe S, right? Your brother-in-law's house. The apostrophe S shows that the house belongs to your brother. For joint possession, when two or more people own something together, add an apostrophe and an S to the last person's name. Jack and Jill's, JILL apostrophe S, house, right? The apostrophe S shows that it belongs to both of them. Alice and Bob's wedding. Bob's BOB apostrophe S wedding, right? The wedding was for Alice and Bob. When two or more people each own something separately, you're going to add the apostrophe S after each person's name. Jack's and Jill's house, right? Jack has his house, Jill has her house, so they both end with the apostrophe S, but separately. Alice and Bob's cars. Alice's car, Bob's car, they both have the apostrophe S separately. For contractions, use an apostrophe to show that the letters have been omitted for contractions. So, for example, don't, right, is do and not. DON apostrophe T means do not, don't. I'm, I apostrophe M, I am. It's, it is, or it has, IT apostrophe S. Now, this is where a lot of people make mistakes. If you're saying that, for example, you have a cat, your cat has a toy, but you're referring to your cat as it's ITS apostrophe because it shows the possession for your cat, which is the it, right? IT apostrophe S is it is or it has. That is not possessive. And I pause. Okay. And also, people get this confused a lot too. Your is possessive, right? YOU apostrophe RE is you are. YOUR is possessive. YOU apostrophe RE is you are. And I pause. Okay. So for numbers and symbols, use an apostrophe to form the plural of letters, numbers, and symbols to avoid confusion, right? For example, the phrase mind your P's and Q's. So you're going to put P apostrophe S and Q apostrophe S. Mind your P's and Q's. There were 2 7s in the number. There were 2 7 apostrophe S in the number. And then another your that we didn't talk about, the possessive form of you. Your book is on the table, right? So now we have your YOUR, your book, the book that belongs to you. Then we have you are your YOU apostrophe R, the contraction for you are. Right? We talked about it. Just reiterate. There versus there versus there, right? So THEIR is the possessive form of they. Their house is beautiful. THEIR, the possessive form of they. The thing belongs to them, right? So their house is beautiful. Their car is gorgeous. Their dorm room is amazing, right? Then you have the contraction for they are. THEY apostrophe THEY apostrophe RE, right? They're going to the beach. They're eating at McDonald's. Um, yeah, there we go. They are not coming to class on time. That is THEY apostrophe RE. And then you have there, THERE, which refers to a place or a position. Over there, THERE. We went there last night. THERE. The book is over there. Okay. Can't stress those enough. Become familiar with these differences because they are distinct and people get them confused very often. All right. Thank you, everyone. That's it for this week. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will be reviewing your narrative essays and return those to you by the 18th. All right. Have a good week.